Hello everyone and welcome to the 11th tutorial in a series of video tutorials for Java programming. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button and click on the bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial I upload on my channel. So in the last tutorial I discussed about the Java arithmetic operators and about the bitwise operators. So in this tutorial I am going to implement certain concepts of Java. Like in the previous tutorials we discussed about loops. Okay, so one small concept was left out, so I am going to discuss about that concept in this tutorial. So the concept is what happens if you put semicolon after for loop. Have you ever explored that? If you are not done so, then let us do that right now. So you know very well that the syntax of the for loop, it is looks something like this. All right, so this program is going to basically print numbers from 1 to 10. So now you know very well that this is the default syntax, okay, for the for loop. Then if I press this play button, it is going to print numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so this is not something which is new or which you don't know. Now let us start exploring. Okay, now I am going to put semicolon after the for statement. So first thing which is going to happen is that this program is not going to execute. But why it is not going to execute? The reason is because it will say I is not defined, and after that, so it is saying cannot resolve symbol I, and after that if you click on this highlighted for, it states that for statement has an empty body. So basically, instead of writing this semicolon, you can simply write this thing. Okay, you can declare another block. Basically it is equivalent to that only. Okay, so you should never ever put a semicolon after the for statement, because if you put the for loop, then if you put the semicolon after the for statement, the program is not going to execute as you expect it to. Okay, the same concept applies after the while loop also. Now let me do with the while loop. So I am going to use the same program, int I equals 1. all right, while I less than or equals to 10. Then after that I am going to put I plus plus here, and then after that I am going to put system.out.println. So this program, it is going to print number from 1 to 10. all right, this program will work perfectly fine. It is not going to give any errors or any kind of problems. So it is printing numbers from 1 to 10, as you can see right here. But what is going to happen if I put semicolon after the while statement? So let us see what happens. So it is going to create a infinite loop actually. So this program, it is never going to end. It is going to create an infinite loop, and it is going to get stuck in the infinite loop. So you can see the highlighted part here, and it shows that value change, it is never used. Okay, and here it is saying that while statement has an empty body, and here it is saying that condition is always true. Why it is saying that? Because it is equivalent to writing this thing. Okay, it is equivalent to writing this thing. Instead of semicolon, you can put this opening and closing bracket, and you have written nothing here. It is not even going to this part. So you should, these are certain concepts which you should always remember, that you should never put semicolon after a for loop for statement, or you should never put a semicolon after a while statement. Now I am going to go one step further, and I am going to explore what is going to happen if you put a semicolon after a if statement. So let's do that. Int I equals 1, if I equals 2. Okay, then system.out.println I is not equals to 2. Okay, so this statement actually, it is going to, this program right now, it is going to work perfectly fine. It is not going to give any kind of bugs or any kind of problems. So it is not going to print this thing because I is I is equal to 2. Okay, so if I equals 2, then it is going to print that I is equals to 2, but right now I is not equals to 2, so it is not going to print anything. Now right now I am going to put this semicolon after the if statement. So what is going to happen? What do you think the output is going to be? The output is going to be I is equals to 2. So let us press the play button and let us see what happens. So I is equals to 2. So why this thing is happening is because here the condition is getting checked, and as I said here earlier, if you put a semicolon, it is equivalent to writing opening and closing bracket. Okay, so basically it is equivalent to this thing. If I equals 2 do nothing. Basically that is how the compiler is going to interpret this thing, and that is why it is showing I equals to 2 even though I is not equals to 2. Okay, so these are certain concepts which you should always remember. Okay, like you should never put a semicolon after for statement, you should never put a semicolon after while, and same applies for if statement. Now let us go one step even more further, and let us see what happens we put a semicolon after switch case statement. So switch I. Okay, then after that here I am going to write case 1 system dot out dot println I plus 1, let us say. So it is going to print the output of 2 because I equals to 1. Okay, so here I am putting switch I, so by default it is going to compare the value of I with the case. So the value of I is 1, so case 1 will get executed, and 1 plus 1 it is going to be equals to 2. Alright, so the output is going to be 2. That is not an issue. But now let us see what happens if you put semicolon right here. If you put semicolon right here, it is already giving an error. It is saying that bracket is expected. Okay, and here also it is giving an error, case statement is outside switch. Okay, and one additional thing which I want to tell you with if statement is, right now as I explained here, if I equals 2, okay, here I am putting that semicolon, and after that I cannot put else here. That is not going to work. Okay, it is working right now, but if I put one additional bracket here, okay, opening and closing bracket, this if statement, it is not going to, this else is going to create a problem. It is saying else is without if, and here you have already declared the if statement, but it is giving error only because of the semicolon. If you remove the semicolon, it will work perfectly fine. Alright, so these are certain things which you need to explore in Java a little bit more, so that you can understand more and more concepts, and the concept will be more, then only you can become an expert in the particular programming language. So now that I have explored what happens if you put semicolon after those particular statements, now I am going to just going to tell you how to declare the variables. So if you want to declare an integer variable, I have already done that. You need to put the data type, then the variable name. Okay, so this is how we need to we can declare a variable. Okay, now if you want to initialize a variable, you can either initialize it right here, or you can first declare a variable, and after that you can initialize it in the next line. So it is up to you, whatever you want to do, it is up to you. Okay, so this is how we declare an integer variable, and float variable is going to be like this. We just need to replace int with float, and this I, it will become a floating variable. And if you want to make it a double, we can simply replace it with float with double, and it will become a double variable. Alright, so then after that, only thing you need to remember is that you just need to type the data type, and after that you need to type the variable name. So if I type byte here, then it will become, I will become a byte variable, and if I make it long, it will become a long variable, and if I make it short, it it will become I will become a short variable, and if I write boolean in front of I, then I will become a boolean variable. Similarly, if I write character char in front of I, then I will become a character variable. Alright, so the variable declaration is going to be very simple. You just need to write the data type, and after that you just need to write the variable name. Okay, so now that we have seen how to declare variables, okay, so it is simply data type, okay, followed by data type followed by the variable name. Okay, so this thing, you know, I discussed it in a tutorial already. This is a comment. Okay, so whenever the Java program compiler it is going to come across this particular statement, it is going to simply ignore it, because you know this is not actually a code actually, so it is not going to execute this thing. Okay, so now that I have told you how to declare the variables for all the primitive types, so now I am going to talk about certain valid literals. Okay, so valid literals means literals, the concept of literals I already discussed in the previous tutorials. So literals are basically the values which are assigned to a particular variable. Okay, so now I am going to talk about certain valid literals. If I talk about the integer variable, okay, then the valid literals can be either decimal numbers. Okay, this is a decimal number, so I can write 16 here. 16 is also going to be a decimal number only. Or what I can do, I can write 06. Now this 06, this is an octal variable. Okay, octal integer. This is an octal integer, as it says, highlights it right here. So 06, this is an octal integer, or you can even write, you know, hexadecimal integer, and for that you need to follow 0x. Then after that you can type whatever you want to write here. So right now I am just going to print out that system.out.println I. I am just going to print what is the value present in I. So this is a hexadecimal format. So as I already told you in the previous tutorials, that you can store, you know, decimal value, hexadecimal value and octal value in an integer variable. So these are the valid literals for the integer variable, but however you cannot store a character variable here. That is not going to work. Actually it is working, because this character variable, you know, it has a particular ASCII code. So right now if I put system.out.println and I put I, okay, the ASCII code of this particular character A, it is going to get printed. Alright, and the ASCII code of A is going to be 65, and if I make it small a, I think it is 97, I think. So that particular value will get printed. Okay, so you can, it's good to know that, you know, you can even store characters in integers, but ultimately the ASCII code is what is going to get stored inside the integer. So now if I talk about characters, okay, as I said earlier, characters can have, you know, even you know, integers also. It can store even integers also. So right now if I put system.out.println, it is going to print B, and I think it is lowercase b. So that is going to be the output. And character can store even you know, obviously it can store characters, or it can store integers. Okay, so now that these are valid literals, you know, which can be stored in characters. As for short, if I talk about short, okay, it can have either a integer decimal value, or you can have a octal value, that is also valid, or it can have hexadecimal value as well. Okay, so if I talk about short, if I talk about byte, long, int, this can have all three kinds of this variables. Like it can have decimal integers, it can have hexadecimal integer, and can have octal integer as well. So now that we have discussed in detail about all those types, now I am going to talk about float and double. So in the previous tutorial, in one of the previous tutorial I already told you that if you want to declare, if you want to initialize float variable, then it is mandatory to put f in the literal. So let's do that. Float f, it is equals to 2.35. so what is going to happen right now? It is going to produce an error. Why it is going to produce an error? The error is produced because this 2.35 by default, this is a double, it is not a float. And here you can see right here, required type is float, but I am providing double. So this 2.35, this is a double. So if you want to convert it into a float, it is mandatory to write f after it. Okay, so you can write whatever you want to write here, but you need to remember that float also has a certain range. Okay, so you cannot you need to keep this literal within that particular range. Then after that you need to mandatorily put f after it. So this is a valid float value. And after that, as per double, it is not going to create any problem. You can store even float integer in double. Okay, it is not going to produce any error. So this is all about implicit type conversion. Okay, so now this is a double variable. You can put d here if you want, but it is not necessary. Okay, it just becomes recurrent, basically repetitive. So it's not necessary to write d, but if you can write d, it is not going to produce an error anyway. So this was all about valid literals. Okay, and as for boolean, that was the only data type which was left. As for boolean, if I talk about boolean, then you need to remember that boolean variable, it accepts only two values, either true, okay, or false. No other value is acceptable. I cannot store an integer here. I cannot write b equals to 1 here. That is not going to work. Okay, it is going to produce an error. Similarly, I cannot store a character over here. It is not going to work. Okay, again it is going to produce the same error. And I cannot store a float value, or I cannot store a double value inside this. Okay, so it is going to produce error. So only valid literals for boolean variable is either true, okay, or false. That's it. These are the only two values which are acceptable by boolean data type. So now that I have talked about valid literals, so then I am going to talk about scope and lifetime of variables. So scope and lifetime of, if I talk about scope and lifetime of variables, then you need to remember one thing. Now I have declared a variable here which is args. Okay, that is the default parameter type, okay, which is provided to the main method. So now what will happen if I try to declare this variable again? It is going to produce an error. It is going to say that it is already defined in the scope. Okay, so what does this mean? That this parameter, okay, it is going to remain in scope until this particular bracket is encountered. Okay, so if I declare it here, it is going to give an error, because now you can understand it very well. Okay, only one statement is there inside this main method. It is going to produce an error. However, if I declare int args here, it is not going to produce any error. So what does that mean? It simply means that this args, it is going to remain in scope until this particular bracket is encountered. As soon as this bracket is encountered, this args, it is going to go out of scope. Then after that you can declare args. It is not going to produce any error whatsoever. Okay, so this was about the scope. Okay, then I am going to show one more thing regarding the scope. Like for example, here I am declaring a variable int I equals to 1. Okay, then after that I am creating one additional block here. I cannot create int I equals to 2 here. That is not going to work. Again it is going to create an error. Why? See, int I equals to 1, it is going to remain in scope until this particular bracket is encountered. So if you don't agree with me, then you can see right here, again I is going to produce an error here. Okay, but if I declare int I here, it is not going to produce any error. So these are certain things, you know, which you need to explore more. Okay, then only you will understand the concept. And one additional thing, you know, what has happened after I deleted this int I, you can see here I created an inner block, and here I created I of variable type int. Okay, so this int I, it is going to be visible only till, you know, this particular bracket is encountered. As soon as this particular bracket is encountered, you know, the compiler, it is going to destroy this variable, and that is why this I equals to 3, this is valid. So let me just explain that with displaying the values of I. System.out.println I, system.out.println I, and after that I am going to simply press the run button here. Okay, so if I press on the run button, it is going to print 2 here and it is going to print 3 here, because both of these variables are completely different. And here if I remove this I equals to 3, it is going to produce the error. Why? Because I is not initialized. See, I is already initialized here, but compiler, it is going to simply ignore it, because this I, it is going out of scope as soon as, you know, this particular bracket is encountered. So this statement, okay, this I equals to 2, this is basically useless when this thing is encountered. Okay, so these are the certain rules for scope and all. Okay, so I think I am running out of time. So already I think the tutorial has gone on for around 20 minutes. So in the next tutorial, okay, whenever I will be using the IDE, I will be talking about global variables, and I will be talking about local variables also a little bit. Okay, so then after that we will be discussing about type conversion. Okay, explicit conversion, implicit type conversion, and after that we'll be talking about arrays also. So that is all I have to talk about in this particular tutorial. So if you have any questions regarding this particular tutorial, then you can definitely ask in the comment section below. I will be happy to answer. And so that's all I have to talk about in this particular tutorial. If you liked this particular tutorial, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye.